Please subscribe.
Okay, Chris Peaks back here today with our BCS State of Alabama podcast, waiting for Brandon Mosley to arrive. And we have another special guest with us here today, former Secretary of State, the Honorable John Merrill. You know, John, when me and Brandon started this a couple of months ago, we were in awe that people didn't line up to listen to us give our infinite wisdom on Alabama politics. And amazing that now we've started getting people in here who people actually want to listen to. The views are going up and the hours of watch time is going up every day. So thank you for coming in and giving us your time here.
Well, thank you for having me as your guest today.
Hold on one second. There's Brandon right there. Okay, so John, when we talk about political families in Alabama, I know the first one that comes to mind is probably the Wallaces and the Folsoms, and I guess even the Jameses. But people don't know that your family has a background too, right? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we do. Actually, I've had a number of relatives who served in different positions in our state's history. Several that served in the Alabama legislature. One, Hugh D. Merrill Sr., who was Speaker of the House of Representatives. Pelham Merrill, who was the pro tem in the House of Representatives, then served 24 years on the state Supreme Court. Hugh D. Merrill Jr. served as chairman of Ways and Means for 16 years and was in the legislature for 24 years. And my father was a circuit clerk in Cleveland County, also probate judge in Cleveland County, a total of 18 years. And then I served in the Alabama legislature for a term from 2010 to 2014, and then as Alabama's 53rd Secretary of State from January the 19th, 2015 to January the 16th of 2023.
And you told me once before that you wanted to be Secretary of State at a young age, right?
Yes, I decided that that's something I would like to consider pursuing when I was about 14 years of age. And I was at a political event with my father there at the courthouse in Cleveland County, there in Heflin, where our courthouse is located. And there was a young man who came to the event that day. This was a event just trying to give people that were running for office an opportunity to come and share their platform and meet folks. And so it was probably late summer of 1978, and he was tall, very attractive, very well spoken. And I asked my dad, I said, who is that guy and what's he running for? He said his name is Don Siegelman and he's running for Secretary of State. And I said, well, what does Secretary of State do? And he said, well, they're responsible for our elections, for business incorporations and licensing, for international adoptions. And I said, that sounds like something I might like to look at some point in the future. And so I started following, at the time, Don Siegelman's career, who he ultimately became governor, but I saw him win that campaign and then go on and do other things. But then watching all the people that held that office from that time in 1978 until I was fortunate enough to be elected by the people of Alabama in 2014.
Interesting you said that about Don Siegelman. Yeah, I guess I should mention the Baxley's political families too. So
Sure.
Bill don't get mad at me that because long time. In 2002, what happened in down there in Baldwin County?
Well, in 2002, there were some concerns about the legitimacy of the election in Baldwin County. Governor Siegelman felt like he won the election in Baldwin County, and yet Governor Riley felt like he had won the election in Baldwin County. When the returns came in that evening, there was some confusion about the reports that were received, and the reports were incomplete when some of the information went out across the state, resulting in some confusion. But one of the people that was actually working in Baldwin County at that time later became my chief of staff, and he told me about everything that occurred that evening, from the administration of the election all the way up until the time that the polls were closed and then the results were posted. And he knows that nothing irregular, inconsistent, no improprieties were introduced. And so I don't know what happened, except that Bob Riley got more votes than Don Siegelman. He won the election in Baldwin County. Subsequently, he won the election to become Alabama's governor.
Hey, Brendan, you there?
Yeah, I was there that was the 2002 election. I was actually working for the Riley campaign. I was at, the probate judge's office in St. Clair County, and I'm the one who phoned in our results to, the Riley campaign once the numbers came in. It's amazing, but from then to now, I guess some of that's credited to Mr. Merrill, how much faster we have those numbers than we did back then. Now by the time the 10 o'clock news is on, unless something's super tight, you generally know what happened. I was at Riley campaign party at Talladega at the the racetrack, and we didn't know for sure what exactly was going on with all our numbers at 12:30 that night.
Mm. Well, and one of the things that we did, Brandon, and I know you're aware of this, but we started election night reporting in real time in 2016, where all of our probate judges, our chief election officials from each one of the 68 jurisdictions in the 67 counties actually report the returns as they come in, and then they can update that through the electronic system. Of course, all that's unofficial, but it keeps people informed. And what it also does is it allows people to see in real time as the numbers change throughout the evening as reports come in from all 67 counties.
Because in 2002, we actually had the spectacle of Don Siegelman, the governor, appearing on stage in front of cameras and doing a victory speech. And I was at Riley headquarters, and we were at the victory party, and we were like, not according to the numbers we have here.
Right, right. It was a different day then, and of course, people behave differently too. But that that change that we made, most people have found that to be really, really beneficial for people that are trying to keep up with the elections, not just for governor, but for all races and in each election cycle that exists.
Now that differs from a state like California. Why is it with Cali, you would think that was the high-tech capital of the universe, that we don't know who wins some of those congressional races out in Cali for like 10 or 15 days after the election?
Well, and part of that is because of their mail-in voting and because of the reporting system that they have in place. And that's one of the reasons why people use us as a model, and they don't use California as a model when it comes to understanding what has happened with the election and what the results actually are that evening. I appreciate you saying that by the 10 o'clock news time, people in our state know unofficially what the results are, because the probate judges in the 68 jurisdictions have done such a good job in getting that information from their precincts, 1,980 precincts when I was or 1,980 polling sites when I was the Secretary of State, and then having those returned to the county seat and then uploaded and then sent to Montgomery for us to make available through that central mechanism.
John, I think that you told me before, and I read this, that Alabama's voting system was the most secure in America.
Well, there's no doubt about that. When I left office, we were recognized by Conservative Women for Good Government, by the Heritage Foundation, and by the University of Southern California in Los Angeles as the premier election system in the United States of America. Subsequently, we've dropped down at least one, maybe two places, but for the first time in the history of the state, we were recognized as the most secure and the most effective and the most efficient reporting system for elections in the United States of America.
Do you think we
There
should do
is a
away with?
little bit of misinformation or discussion out there. Am I correct that our voting machines, our machine tabulators, do not have a modem and do not connect to the internet?
That is correct, Brandon. As a matter of fact, we started replacing our voting tabulators, the machine where you insert your ballot, where those votes are counted and recorded. And we started doing that in the 2016 cycle. And before we left office, all the voting machines had been replaced in each one of the 1,980 polling sites in the state of Alabama. They're not connected to the internet, and they have not been connected to the internet. And when we had them designed without modem capability. So you could not transfer information electronically from that location to a central reporting location by the use of that equipment at all. And the main reason that I wanted to do that at that time, and this is before any of those concerns were introduced in the 2020 election, is because I didn't want someone in Kusada or Widawi or Eclectic or Satsuma asking me, are our pieces of equipment vulnerable? Are they able to be infiltrated? Are they able to be impacted in a negative way? And can the results be changed? Because they could not be changed. There is no capability for that to occur.
So when we see that Kay Ivey got over 50% of the vote in 3 years ago, and Dean Odle got less than 5%, we can trust that those results are the actual results.
Not only are they accurate results, they were unchallenged. You know, if an individual has a concern about the legitimacy of an election, Brandon, there is a way to challenge that. Clearly stated in the Code of Alabama, you just need to follow the law, and you need to appeal to the local probate judge in the jurisdiction where you want that challenged. Then it goes through the court proceedings where the ballots are actually unsealed, and then they can be checked again, and then you can determine if the results were the same. That's one of the reasons why we started to have an accountability procedure in place in the 2022 election, where we would be able to have an audit conducted. And we did that in just a few counties in the state, and then gave a report to the legislature. Now there's another bill that's being considered to make that in place in all 67 counties and all 68 jurisdictions. But there is already a mechanism in place for that challenge to occur if someone is concerned that the results are not as they should be.
Do you think we should do away with mail-in balloting? Because it seems like that, and I've read Congressman Brooks told me about a study that was done with President Carter and Secretary of State James Baker, where they said that was the biggest threat to our democracy.
Well, I think it depends on how it's done. Alabama's is the most secure in the nation. We require that an individual that actually wants to vote by mail through the absentee process has to make application to receive a ballot. And so they have to fill out the application and send it in to, or do it in person, to the absentee election manager, which in most jurisdictions is the circuit clerk. When that's done, they are provided with a ballot when that ballot is available. If they do it in person, most of the time the ballot's already available. Then they vote on their ballot. They secure their ballot in the secrecy envelope. It's sealed. Then it's placed in the return envelope and either mailed by that individual or hand delivered by that individual to the absentee election manager. And then that is not opened until election day. But that's one of the most secure methods that exist in the United States of America today. So I'm not saying that mail-in voting should be changed, but I am saying this: I think the model for mail-in voting is in the state of Alabama. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've been so successful. We've had so few challenges. And then whenever we have had incidences that have occurred, that we've had resulting convictions in voter fraud whenever those have been introduced. We had 8 convictions on voter fraud when I was Secretary of State, which was the most in the nation during that 8-year period of time.
Well, shifting
There are
gears here, what do you think? Go ahead, Brandon.
there are certain individuals that are pushing for um, hand counting of all the election results and getting rid of the machine tabulators. Do you believe that would add an element of potential dishonesty if you didn't trust the people doing the counting in certain counties?
Look, Brandon, the one thing that I know is that if you want to increase the possibility for voter fraud to occur, you need to engage in hand counting of ballots. The one place that I have seen hand counting of ballots occur is when I was an international election observer in Russia back in September of 2016. And to watch how they did it and how they counted it by hand and how they separated the ballots by hand is ripe for fraud. And one of the things that was shared with me by probate judge in Morgan County, Judge Kane, was this. He said, you tell anybody that ever asks you, this is how we do our provisional ballots. Whenever they come together after the election, which would be the Friday after the Tuesday of the election, to count the provisionals, he said, we always sit down. I give everybody a sheet of paper so that they can check them along with us as we go over each ballot. We hand count the ballots. He said, we only do 10 ballots at a time, regardless of how many we have. If we have 23, if we have 233, we count them 10 at a time. And he said, invariably, every time that we've ever done this, every instance has resulted in an error by at least one of the people that's in there counting by hand when we go through it. And so we have to go back and redo it, but that's why we only do 10 at a time. And I think that's important for people to note. There's always an opportunity for human error, but when there's more individual hands touching the ballots and engaging in that type activity, the result can often be unlike what you receive by having the machine actually do the counting for you.
It's interesting you said that. I remember Tori King told me a story that when the Wallace political machine was going, that they would call and say like, "Hey, we need 5,000 votes coming out of Pickens County tonight," and they would say, "We don't have 5,000 voters in there." It's like, that's not what I told you. I told you we need 5,000 votes coming out of there. So you was in Russia. What city in Russia did you
But
go
let
to?
me say what you, just since you introduced this, Chris, I think it's
Okay.
important to go back. You will always know how many ballots you started with statewide. Then you know how many ballots went to each one of the 67 counties. Then you know how many ballots went to each one of the 1,980 polling sites in the state. Then you know how many ballots were actually cast by the voters that went to the polling site that day. You know how many voters came to the polling site that day. You know how many ballots may have been spoiled, sold, or damaged and unable to be used. And when you're able to add up all those numbers at the end of the day, it should be exactly the same number. If it's not the same number, then you know that there was a mistake at some level, and you can go back and determine where that error occurred, and then you know how to begin addressing that according to the policies and procedures that are in place for election administration. And then the code tells you what the result of that investigation should be if it does not come out the way that it should, which is to equal the number that was on the machine.
Oh wow. Okay. So you told me you was in Russia
Yes,
as an
I was an
observer?
international election observer in Russia with the Office of Security and Exchange in Europe. And I was selected to do that along with one of my assistants in the office at the time. His name was John Bennett. We went to Russia. I was in Volgograd, and that's where I observed the elections. John had to actually go to the far-reaching parts of Russia, but we were over there for 10 to 12 days during September of 2016, and it was an unbelievable experience. I was the highest ranking U.S. official that was present for that activity.
So shifting gears right here, John, what do you think facing the number one issues facing Alabama now?
Oh, look, we have a number of issues that are very important in our state and to the people of our state. I think some of the top issues are infrastructure, job creation, education, healthcare, mental health, law enforcement. Those issues are extraordinarily important, and they should be important to each and every one of the 5 million Alabamians in our state.
We seem to have an inordinate amount of, I guess, criminal gang activity in our major metro areas. Birmingham, Montgomery, Mobile comes to mind. I mean, the number of people murdered in Birmingham last year was just mind-boggling, given the size of the town. The governor has created a crime suppression unit, that will go in and lock down some of these neighborhoods and some of these worst areas. What is your what is your view on that sort of aggressive law enforcement?
Look, I don't know that our law enforcement is able to be as aggressive as we need them to be in order to protect the people in this state that need to be protected. And that's the average law-abiding citizen that goes around trying to take care of their business each and every day, do everything that they can within their power to provide for their family and to live a life that is unimpeded by the government, unimpeded by other people trying to cause them ill will or harm, and just trying to enjoy themselves, provide for their family, and do the things that are necessary for them to live the life that they want to live. I think because of the litigious nature of our society today, a number of law enforcement officers are hesitant, reluctant, and sometimes actually intimidated to be able to do their job effectively. I think one of the things that we have to do to provide our law enforcement officers with the support that they need, to let them know that we're behind them and to encourage them to do their job the way that they've been trained to do it successfully. When we identify people that are in law enforcement that maybe don't have the best motives for doing the job that they've been hired to do, those people need to be replaced. If they need to be investigated, if they need to be indicted, if they need to go to the penitentiary because of the things that they're doing or that they're not doing, then we need to give that attention as well. But we have got to make sure that those outstanding people who have decided to serve as first responders, primarily since we're talking now in the area of law enforcement, we've got to make sure that those people have the resources they need and that they have the support they need so they can do the job they've been hired to do.
John, you mentioned education a while ago, and it seems like every year that's at the front. And I know that a couple of years ago we were ranked 24th or 25th on dollars spent or something. Is the money we're spending not being allocated right, or what do we have to do to get our education system moving upwards?
Chris, it's not about the money. I mean, the money is very important, but the money is primarily used in the area of personnel, is to hire qualified people to serve as teachers, is to hire qualified people to serve as administrators, is to hire qualified people to serve as transportation advisors and directors and bus drivers, to have people that are hired that are qualified to serve in custodial areas or in aides in the classroom. Whatever it happens to be, we need to make sure that the resources are there in order to meet those needs. Now, there are other families that would prefer to have their children educated in a homeschool environment or to go to a private parochial or independent school. All of those opportunities need to be provided to the people of Alabama. But we have to remember that public school education is the most important thing that we can invest in our state, because at some point, all of us will interact with people who've gone through the public school environment. And we need to make sure that the education that they're receiving is high quality and is educating them at the level where they say they have been educated and that they are able to function in society in a positive way that enables them to be able to be positive contributors in all aspects of our society.
John, Governor Ivy in her 8 years and now extending on out, has done a really good job of economic development. We brought in a lot of factories. We've, data centers. We've expanded existing factories. We're running up into now where the barrier isn't sites, it isn't economic development money, it's the availability of workers that we're running into a workforce participation issue where only about 57, 58% of the Alabama population is involved in the workforce. Is there something the state can do to get somebody off the couch who theoretically could work,
Sure.
but for whatever reason doesn't want to?
Absolutely. And Brandon, look, one of the things that we have to do is we have to stop incentivizing people to stay at home, sit on the couch, eat potato chips and drinking Coca-Colas. We have to quit allowing those people to receive a check just because they're able to fog a mirror. People that need some type of support, if it's important for them to receive that because of their physical disability or because of their inability to be able to find a job because they've been injured. We need to find a way to give attention to those things, but that cannot be the primary path that people choose in order to receive a check. We've also got to make sure that we are educating our people so that when they finish their education, their high school education, they're able to enter the workforce. Some people choose to go to college. Some people want to go immediately to the workforce. Wherever it is, we have to make sure those people are qualified to do jobs. And so workforce development is primary in our state to ensure that when people take that next step, when they finish their education, they can go forward and they can get a job that will pay a living wage, that will allow them to be able to do the things that are necessary to contribute to society in a positive way, no matter what kind of location that is, whether it's building homes, brick building, masonry, carpentry, all of those things, whether it's working to build roads and working for major providers of people that do that in the concrete or the asphalt industry, also making sure that people are able to go work in the healthcare industry or first response service industry. All of those things are so very important to us, and we have to make sure that we continue to invest in that in the K-12 segment, as well as the community education segment and higher education segment.
John, do you think that we should have a Doge type organization in Alabama that looks for waste, fraud, and abuse?
Well, I really think that that should already be going on, Chris. I think most people know about our service in the Office of the Secretary of State. One of the first things that I did when I became the Secretary-elect, was to go to Montgomery. I received permission from Secretary Bennett, who was in the role at that time, for me to sit down and to talk to each one of the 49 employees that were currently working in the Office of the Secretary of State. I wanted to find out why those people were working there. I wanted to know what they felt they were contributing and what their goals were for their employment with the office. And it became very clear to me very quickly that we had some outstanding state employees and we had some that needed to find something else to do outside of state government. And so as we started those conversations, one of the things that I was told was that we don't really need to worry about the people that are working there. Just some of them, and one particular individual was introduced to me. They said, comes to work when he wants to. He goes to lunch when he gets ready. He comes back when he wants to, and he goes home at the end of the day when he gets ready to leave. And just don't give him anything to do in a timely fashion, no deadlines, and everything will be fine. And I said, really? I said, is this guy a full-time employee? And they said, yes. Well, I'm just the guy to have taken an intern and assigned that intern to monitor whatever this particular gentleman was supposed to be doing to make sure that he was fulfilling his commitment to the people of the state of Alabama and drawing a full day's pay for a full day's work. He made it 3 months before he left the Office of the Secretary of State when we got to Montgomery. We went from having 49 employees to 36 team members when I left the office of the Secretary of State. One of the things that we inherited was that they were 7 to 9 months behind on business filings when we arrived. That meant if you sent a check down there and paperwork to be filed to create a new job opportunity for people in our state through a new business, it was 7 to 9 months before they cashed your check or before they processed your paperwork. And if you paid them extra, they would expedite your filing. And we eliminated the expedition of that work. And we actually had it, after we'd been there a year and a half, we had it to same day. And it was same day for the 6.5 years that we remained in that office. And we were able to do the amount of work that had been done by 49 people by 36 people. So we cut the workforce by 25%. I think that's doable in all the different areas of state government, from the Department of Transportation to Department of Labor, Department of Rehabilitation Services, Department of Health, Department of Education. All the different departments in the state of Alabama can do that if they are committed to that procedure.
The president has imposed a number of tariffs on various trading partners. I think we're
Brandon, before
almost
you
on that.
that during that time with those savings, we also saved $3,113,119.19 cash money.
Okay.
Wow.
The president has imposed some tariffs on a bunch of our trading partners. Alabama, we make cars, but a lot of the components to those cars, I mean, if we had American cars, it'd be the same deal. A lot of those components are made elsewhere. Is there a concern if you slap a 25% tariffs on, the transmission to a Hyundai that's built in, a Montgomery, that we may price ourselves out of the car market when you add all those tariffs onto the cost of the vehicle that produced here?
Brandon, I think there's a lot of concern about how the tariffs are actually going to impact our industry and people that work in industry in the state of Alabama. But I also think that most people that I come in contact with, and most people that I've heard from, and most of the things that I've read, is that people are concerned that we're not being treated fairly by some of our trading partners that we've been engaged with for a long time. And they have been taking advantage of the fact that we have been benevolent in our transactions with them. And because of that, we've actually lost money from a national perspective because they require us to pay a certain fee in order to do business in their nation. And now the president has made it clear that he's not going to accept that as a way to do business anymore. He's going to make sure that if they're requiring us to pay certain tariffs, certain transaction fees, then we're going to have to require them to do the same thing, so our people will not be mistreated in the marketplace anymore.
With the president enforcing ICE going in enforcing the deportation measures, are we going too far or not far enough?
Well, I'm just like the two of y'all, and I hope anybody else is listening to the broadcast today. We want anyone that wants to come to the United States and live here to be able to come, but we want them to come the right way. And there is a right way, and it's prescribed by federal law for you to become a U.S. citizen or to you obtain a green card so you can actually come here as a visitor and work, or for you to come here as a student and study. There's a prescribed way for you to do all those things. And if you choose to do those things according to law, you will not have a problem. If you don't, you can't try to circumvent that just because you don't like the law. You need to find legislators, whether at the federal level or the state level, depending on what the particular issue is, to modify the law or to change the law if you don't like the law. But you can't just try to circumvent the law and make it up as you go. There's a prescribed way for citizenship. There's a prescribed way to be an international worker in our nation. and there's a prescribed way to be an international visitor, to come here as a tourist, or to study here. And all those things have got to be adhered to. And if people are not doing that, then we need to make sure that they are identified as lawbreakers and they need to be punished accordingly.
We've talked with Ag Commissioner Rick Pate, and he said that when he came into office, he looked at it and he found out that most of the school systems in Alabama weren't really buying any of their, their foodstuffs from Alabama farmers. They were just going on there, getting it from institutional sources nationally. He got the legislature to give some money, and I think he eventually got it up where like 49 systems regularly buy food now, produce from Alabama farmers. Is there a way to increase that where like most systems, purchase food locally grown from our own Alabama farmers first? We don't get
Absolutely, and
overcharged.
that's something that's long overdue, Brandon. It's something that Commissioner Pate needs to be applauded for, because those conversations that took place between our farmers, our producers of not just produce and meat, but our educators, whether it be at the state of Alabama's Department of Education or the 140 plus local school systems in the state of Alabama, to come together. Some of those buying consortiums. I know when I worked for the Tuscaloosa County school system, we were often the lead agent in working with the Tuscaloosa City schools and other surrounding areas, whether it be Hale County, Pickens County, other systems, to enable them to have a greater opportunity to make a purchase at a lower rate than they would be able to, because we bought at a high quality because we had so many schools. I think that it's important to make sure that whenever products that are purchased at the level that you're talking about, to be able to provide a meal for our students, if those things can be brought, if they can be bought locally, they need to be purchased locally. And we need to encourage that, because that helps our local folks as well as our students. And whenever possible, if a school and a school system can engage in the production of some of those resources by having a farm type setting there on their campus, if it's there at an elementary school, if it's at a middle school, if it's at a high school, a community college setting, or a four-year institution, those things should also be considered and done as well.
Staying on the topic of students and schools, one of my favorite shows is deal with Chris Hansen. He's made a living up here in Blount County catching people. And a couple months ago, they just got another teacher. Is there something we need to do to further protect our students from these students that are, or teachers that are preying on 13, 14-year-old kids as far as sentences?
Look, there are laws in place to deal with those individuals that choose to make those poor choices and that introduce them in that particular environment. Whenever that happens, those people need to be identified. They need to be investigated. If it's warranted, they need to be indicted. Then they need to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And most of the time when that happens and those people are convicted, they lose their teaching license or their ability, if they're not a certified classroom teacher, to interact with a student or students in a student environment, because they are looked at as child predators, and there's other laws and regulations that impact them as well. Those things need to continue to be adhered to, and they need to be focused on by law enforcement and by prosecutors.
Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth has made a big issue of, that fact that most of I-65 is still 4-laned. Is there a way to 6-lane that moving forward, or are the days of big government infrastructure projects probably going away if the federal government ever decides to balance its books?
Well, Brandon, as you know, Governor Ainsworth has made that a priority, and he's made it his intention to have I-65 3 and 4 laned all the way to, well, from Huntsville or really the state line all the way down to Mobile. I think one of the things that Governor Ivey's administration has done, they've concentrated on through Director Cooper and his leadership at the Department of Transportation, is to find alternative routes where certain traffic patterns can change if certain roads have been improved, to take people off of I-65 and to make that be an acceptable form of relocation of the path for people to get from point A to point B. In some instances, I think that's acceptable. In others, it's not. But just because you increase the size of I-65 does not necessarily mean that the problem is going to be solved, because as you know, Alabama's population continues to grow. If you look at Alabama's population over the last 50 years, we've grown at an average of about 5% a year over the last 50 years. And that's something that we need to be proud of, but it's also something that we need to understand that brings challenges with it. And so that growth with more and more automobiles is going to continue to be a concern.
Do you think that we say it fell again, that eventually we should get gambling here in Alabama of some sort, because we're losing so much money to other states? Or should we leave it how it is, because with gambling there comes some societal ills?
Well, look, my position on gambling is what it's always been, and I'm opposed to the expansion of gambling in the state of Alabama. We already have some commitment to gambling through the Indians, through other methods that are currently in place that are legal. Those that are illegal need to be removed from the state. Those that are there, I'm not for expanding those. As far as people having an opportunity to vote on a lottery or on a gaming issue, that's determined by the Alabama legislature. And that work has yet to be done by the legislature to take a bill to the people and to have them consider a constitutional amendment which would allow the opportunity for people to vote on whether or not there was a state lottery created for a particular purpose or for no purpose in general, where all the money went to the state to be dispersed the way that they wanted it to create a Hope Scholarship like Georgia's got, other scholarships like the state of Tennessee has. But I'm not for the expansion of gaming. I never have been, I never will be. But I will say this, if it comes up for a vote of the people of Alabama, I would not be opposed for the people of Alabama to have an opportunity to have their voice heard on that issue. But my voice will be one to say that I'm in opposition to this, because I have never seen gaming or gambling increase the amount of money that is brought into a state. It simply changes the way that that money is allocated, because you have a certain amount of money in your home, Chris. Brandon has a certain amount of money in his home. Cindy and I have a certain amount of money in our home. If we choose to spend that money to go see Alabama play football, if we choose to spend that money to go to a trip to New York, if we choose to spend that money to go to the beach, we can do that. If we choose to spend that money on gambling, we can do that. But we're not creating additional money in our households. We're choosing how we spend that money. And the amount of money that's being spent is going to be invested in certain pots. And when you are talking about gaming, you're just putting a particular amount of money into a different pot each and every time. You're not creating new resources. The only way you create new resources is through taking a raw product, finding a way to improve that product. You don't create money through service industries, which is what gaming is. You only create it through manufacturing and processing and through the creation of jobs and increasing your industrial base, period. That's simple economics.
It's just a backdoor tax. Would you agree with that, or a deceitful tax on people?
Well, it's a tax if you choose to participate in it. If you don't choose to participate in it, it's not.
Governor Ivey has in his second term has spent a lot of political capital on building the 2 mega prisons, to try to deal with some of our deteriorating correctional facilities. The cost on those 2 mega prisons has risen. I think we're at like $2.3 billion now There's going to be another bond issue to pay for more of that. Is this project showing that, there's a finite amount of money and space we can spend on housing inmates?
Well, obviously there is, Brandon, and I think that Commissioner Ham, through his leadership, and Governor Ivy, through her leadership, are trying to find the best way to do that. We also have got to give attention to counties in this state who really don't have a way to address their inmates that have been convicted of crimes in their particular county and need to be housed in those particular locations. We have some counties in our state that don't have functional jails right now. As a matter of fact, we have one county, Choctaw County, that doesn't have a jail at all. And so they have to transport their prisoners to another location. And every time you're moving an inmate from one location to the other, the opportunity for something bad to occur increases. And that individual may be involved in something that results in them escaping, or it may be that in the transition, there's a situation that arises where they're able to cause harm for other people that are involved in that transportation. So I think there's a lot of things that need to be considered, but we have to look at what the opportunities are in all 67 counties, as well as with the mega prisons that you're talking about.
John, let me ask you this again. I know we talked about it before. Me and Brandon's talked about this on a lighter note. Hate to get you repeat yourself, but this, I stopped watching athletics because of this NIL. I mean, is there anything we can do to stop this? Because it's not the same anymore.
Well, look, what we currently have with the NIL, with the transfer portal, none of this is sustainable. Coach Saban started talking about this a couple of years ago when he talked about how you're actually asking people who go and support their institution of higher learning in our state, whether it's Alabama, Auburn, UAB, Troy, Jacksonville State, West Alabama, University of South Alabama, Stillman College, Miles College. We can name every institution, University of North Alabama. We can name every institution of higher learning in the state of Alabama. But the ones that are really being hurt the most are not Alabama and Auburn, and they're going to be hurt. They've been hurt, and they're going to be hurt more. It's those other institutions that don't have near the athletic budget that Alabama and Auburn have, and those folks are still trying to compete with Alabama and Auburn, not necessarily for the same athletes, but for the same resources. And so it makes it more difficult for people to be able to support the team that they want to support by paying a ticket price, but then going to the concession stand, buying 2 hot dogs, a Coca-Cola, some popcorn, and paying $50 for that to go back and sit down in their seat when they've already paid money for their tickets or to pay for parking at the location for the event that they went to watch. And the unsustainability of what we're seeing by having these student athletes, if you can call them that now, actually say that they are going to require you to pay them X number of dollars, just like the situation with the quarterback at the University of Tennessee, who was being paid $2 million a year and then said, no, he wants to be paid $4 million a year. The starting quarterback in the National Football League for the San Francisco 49ers, Brock Purdy, made less than $1 million when he took his team to the Super Bowl in his rookie season. I mean, this is not a sustainable situation, and it's something that's going to cause the end of college athletics as we know it. If they want to continue this, they're going to have the federal government and state governments get involved to start setting up contractual agreements and to make sure that these individuals that are receiving these resources are actually paid for the services rendered. But then if they're not performing, they have to be let go. But if you are actually paying a student athlete to come and be at your institution of higher learning for 3 years, if they leave early, then it's just like with coaches buyout. Somebody needs to pay that money back. So there's a lot of things that need to be considered. And I certainly don't have all the answers, but I will tell you this is something that unless there's a handle that is gotten gripped on this issue, is going to destroy college athletics as we know it.
Yes, there was a point I think like last week where Andy Kennedy, the coach at UAB, had one player on his roster left because everybody else either graduated or they went to the transfer portal to make more money from like the Alabama and Auburns who had more money in the NIL pot.
Absolutely. And it's really devastating. And it makes it harder on fans because one of the things that you could do as a fan is you would know that when a student athlete signed with your institution of higher learning, unless it was an injury or for some reason that student decided to transfer, they were actually able to stay at your school for 3 to 4 years. And if they were redshirted, maybe 5 years. But now it's gotten to be a situation where you'll have a team and the next year you could have, just like you described with the UAB Blazers basketball program, an entirely new roster the following year. That does not build community support.
Yeah, I know as an Auburn fan, I'm a season ticket holder, been season ticket holder for years. I used to look forward to those blowout tune-up games because then I could see, that guy that we signed to a scholarship last year, the year before, and now he gets in the game and we can evaluate him. And then when he becomes a starter in his junior year, I had memories of that guy throughout his recruiting process, his freshman year, his sophomore year. Now, when I get a roster, and I follow Auburn very closely, there's probably only a dozen names
Sure.
that I'm familiar with from the squad before because it seems like it's a wholesale swap out of our guys transferred out and new guys transferred in.
That's right. There's no doubt about it. It's not the Auburn football program, the Auburn basketball program, or any sport, name any sport at Auburn University that you grew up with, Brandon.
John, I think that's all the questions I have for you today. I think I've kept you almost an hour. Thank you for coming on.
Well, I appreciate y'all reaching out and giving me the opportunity to interact with y'all. Please feel free to call me back anytime. It's been a privilege to visit with you today, and I appreciate the great work y'all are doing for the state of Alabama.
Thank you so much, Secretary Merrill.
Take care.
And